Alright, welcome back baseball fans to another elimination video. Today we're going to eliminate the Texas Rangers, who finished 20-20. Very similar story to a year prior. However, the pitching was a little bit worse than it was a year ago. The offense was about the same. They snuck into the playoffs by winning in the round of 3, beating Baltimore, which is a stunner. Then they lost. The difference is they didn't win in the round of 3. They lost to Ohio. And so ultimately, well, the numbers are straight. They scored 184 runs. They gave up 185 runs. The bright spots were the offense. Some nice big bats, but a lot of it is at corner, first base, DH positions. Grieve could have played even more. He led the team in hitting 56. Hargrove did what his card suggests. McMullen was fantastic. Also could have played more. Led the club in homers. Was an afterthought, just as a reserve player, but he got a lot of playing time. Sundberg overachieved. The Dave Rader card that crushes lefties turned out to hit just 268. And then some other players were just kind of ordinary. Len Randall was ordinary. Dave Nelson was ordinary. Burroughs was the MVP a year ago, and he fell down to a 252 average. And the biggest failure was Toby Harrah hitting just 226 with just 10 stolen bases. And he was the leadoff man, and he also struggled with the glove. Foucault was the lone all-star with his 9 saves and great stats for a closer, 148 ERA and a 66-cent whip. Opposite end of the spectrum, Paul Lindblad, same number of innings, struggled mightily. An unbelievable 6.56 ERA. However, I will say this, and look again at Jim Bibby with a 4.84 ERA. A lot of times, Texas's pitchers are just left in the games for a beatdown because they don't got anybody else. They are short innings. They don't have any innings pitched horses on this team. They have vacancies at the top for a number 1 and 2 starter. So that's part of the problem. Maybe they can fix that in the offseason. They are a team on the rise. How much they rise is up for debate. But let's take a look now at the Texas Ranger card stack. We're first going to pull out the 8 players from 1973 that we know are going to need a new card. And we have at least one guy, maybe two guys there. It's not a super impressive list of guys coming back. Obviously, Frank Howard's a Hall of Famer, but his career's over. And in the timeline, Burroughs is a lock, but everybody else is sort of kind of not particularly special, and sometimes that's a good thing, where you're not tied to marrying the guys in your keeper list. Here is a look at a balanced 7 hitters and 5 pitchers. This Ken McMullen card did fantastic, and when you think about it, look, it's symmetrical there with all the power. Corner guy. They really don't need a corner guy, though. That's the problem. Trying to fit him into a lineup with a redundancy at third base and first base, DH, corner, outfield. You got 2 catchers. One's lefty, one's righty, but that's all they can play. They can't play like first or third or whatever. And so that's nice to have those guys. Hargrove should probably just lock into first base and leave him alone. Just put him at first every day, bat him second or third, and just leave him alone. But they necessarily didn't. They juggled him around too much. Randall's every day at third base. You can make him every day at second base, so that you have that option moving forward. You might have better results at third. And Harris locked in at short, but boy, we'd love to figure out this defense. If there was a great shortstop, third baseman, or second baseman, doesn't matter. You have the flexibility with these 2 guys to move to those other positions. Because you could put Toby Harrah at third now and make him a 2. And like I said, Randall could go to second. You don't want Randall at short. That's the only caveat there. So that gives them flexibility to find the guy, or 2 guys really, in a platoon at any of those combination middle infield spots. And in the outfield, it's just Joe LaHood for now. He's a nice platoon guy, left-handed bat. You might leave him in the lineup versus a lefty if he starts the game, but you obviously want a platoon, ideally. The 5 pitchers, well, here's the thing. They can take advantage of the starter 7 Perzanowski card, which is pretty nice, even though his innings pitch total is low. It's a quality ERA, and there was a lot of Texas pitchers in this timeline. The Steve Dunnings, the Don Stanhouses, the Steve Hargans, and they're not really very, Pete Broberg, they're not very good. At least this guy's actually good. So you might as well give him either your 2, 3, or 4 roster rotation spot. And Umbarger, the lefty, who's a starter 6. He can be a 2, 3, or 4 for this team. But they still need to eat some more innings. Hargan might be better suited to move into the Bill Hands role as the long man in the bullpen with Foucault and Lindblad. And here are those guys. Hard to believe this guy had a 6.56 ERA. When you look at it, you know, he's better against righties and lefties. That's great for a reliever. And he's a relief 3, as is Foucault. So, yeah, you could see there's 2 holes for the top 2 pitchers in this team. We're assuming Fergie Jenkins is the guy going forward in a trade with the Cubs. But in any event, for your Texas Rangers, now we'll take a peek at those 1973 cards to see which guys they want to keep, put on waivers, and retire. All right, the first player to look at is Jeff Burroughs. And this is sort of super no-brainer territory here. Yep, he's your 1974 American League MVP. And so that's what you do. Plain and simple. And if you're wondering why, and it's a good reason, why has that card not already been assigned to Jeff? It is largely because the 73 card won my MVP. I gave it to him with that performance in the league a year ago, and just simply thought that it wasn't there wasn't much difference between the 2 cards, and I wanted to ride with a hot card. So Burroughs with his 73 card wins an MVP when he actually won it with a 74 card. So it's a slight year switch, but generally, you know, loosely overlapping years and so forth, we sort of try and cover as much MLB history as we can fit. It kind of is plausible, I would say. All right, next guy is Boots Day. I don't know how much time he has left. How many Boots are there? There's a lot. But Boots is the last one. Maybe we need a new Boots. Maybe your favorite player can be the nickname Boots, particularly if he's got a high on-base percentage, drawing the bases on balls. We would love to say these boots are made for walking as much as we can. All right, so Boots was actually pretty decent in center field. He was a Cardinal in '69, so he wasn't on the expansion expos, but he got there in '70 and hung around. He plays in the year of '74, not very well. Can he get waivers for that performance? He has to have a card for the expos in '74. We have the roster sheet. You can find all these roster sheets at superds.tripod.com. We have the 74 brought up. And by the way, if you ever get one of these, at the very top it'll show the following year. This is the year you purchased the set for the previous year's stats, if you're curious about that. And we want to know if the Expos Boots Day exists. So we go to Montreal. He's not listed in their outfielders. He could be an extra player, so you have to scroll down further. He is. So he qualifies for waivers because he's got a card in 1974. So we go to the middle column for waivered players, and he gets $100. And go look for a job elsewhere. Next up is Tom Grieve. We thought Tom just had his best year, 73. We can double check that though. I think he's got one more decent platoon year in here somewhere. Perhaps even a couple. So 73, we love this 309 card. It's expired. Now, he's got some high on-base OPSs here. Yeah, 75 is going to be a good card for him. At least 75. It's a 2-year contract. So they're going to bring back Grieve. At the least, he could platoon with Joe LaHood. At the least. We like, cross our fingers we can get him to play every day. That'd be good. Next up, we got to give a farewell finally to Frank Howard, Mr. Electric. Boy, we loved his 1969 and 70 cards. My goodness, folks, how much fun has that been? Him and Mike Epstein terrorizing the American League in that those 69 and 70 cards. There they are. I didn't have a 68 card. He led the league in slugging 68. That was the year it was a dead ball, right? Or was that 67 with a dead ball? Well, 67 he had 849 OPS. 68 was kind of a dead ball too when you think about it. But 69 was definitely juice ball there, and he had 976 OPS, 962 in 70. It's all over 1973. Went out with the Tigers. So with that, thank you, Frank Howard. It's been a lot of fun. He had a short little stint going to Texas, leaving Washington before he went to Detroit. But it's into retirement for Frank Howard. All right, next. Dave Nelson, another guy, sort of like Grieve, had his best card, was 73. Grieve and Nelson had their best years together in 73. Interesting, because you know in 74 the Rangers actually make some noise. We also know Nelson is a Kansas City Royal somewhere in here, but it's much later. He's an all-star in 73. He has MVP votes. That's kind of makes some sense. So in 74, his average drops 50 points. And but you know what? He's still got some speed. His WAR drops from 3.2 to 0.4. Oh boy. Well, you know, if we can make him part of a platoon and make it so he's not an everyday player, I'd be for that. I'd go with Hara, Randall, Nelson, and help for Nelson. Perhaps a left-handed bat. Maybe a guy who has some power but doesn't necessarily steal bases. Could be a third baseman or shortstop, that guy I'm talking about, because you could move Len Randall to second base when Dave Nelson's not playing there. So this is what we talked about as far as this infield flexibility the Rangers have. Looking for the right fit. We're going to keep Nelson for now. If somebody better comes along, they can put him on waivers. Now the pitching. Jim Bibby. Bibby moves around baseball a lot here in 12-year career. Has a stint with the Indians. He was a Cardinal, a Ranger, an Indian, a Pirate. Came back to Texas in '84 for a cup of coffee. So here we are in '74 with the Rangers. I hate to say it again. We keep saying '73 was the year. Maybe this is exactly why the Rangers have been so competitive. They're losing guys who were really good in '73, and then after that, it's... Now, he wasn't good at all in '74. He was 19-19 with a 4.74 ERA for Billy Martin's Texas Rangers. In '75, 181 innings, he's okay. '76 and '77, there you go. He's Cleveland's property. However, the Rangers could take Cleveland's property, or they could make a deal with Cleveland if they want their property. But when you look at '77, even '76, that's an innings eater right there. 206 innings in '77. That's a 4-year contract. It could be you land Fergie Jenkins and Jim Bibby are your number 1 and 2 with Umbarger at the 3-hole. That's totally plausible. Jim Bibby's a keeper. I'm going to make the note at 77 is what the year we want. And I'll also make a note about Cleveland. Could be on All right, David Clyde. Well, there isn't really one great year for him, other than he gets older, I guess. Okay, David Clyde. They're not, yeah. For some reason, he doesn't go by Dave on Baseball Reference. There we go. So, yeah. Here's the thing. You can't get the 78 performance yet. Might be the best performance of his career by a little bit. Can't get that. Can't get there yet. 74 and 5. He's a Ranger. 74 is a Ranger, and this is sort of what I said earlier about the Rangers had a lot of pitchers, but not a lot of them very good. Joining Dunning and Stanhouse and Broberg and so forth. Here's another example. The only selling point is the guy throws a baseball with his left hand. So if he's got an opportunistic split and can get some lefties out, and we're only going to know once we look at the card, he can join Lindblad in the bullpen as two lefties. That's very effective. Matchups, playing matchups that way. And they can just go with Umbarger in the rotation as the 3 guy, and then find a 4 guy to be right in it for the number 4 spot. That's what they could do. It's got to be 74 though, right? Yeah, 74 for Clyde. For the moment, we'll just put keeper, even though he doesn't really warrant a keeper. But yeah, arguably he goes on waivers. Could be Dave Nelson on waivers. Obviously, Burrows is a lock. Bibby practically should be a lock. They still got to figure out what to trade to the Cubs. They get Cubs gonna have Bill Hands back. I think we're there next. Yes, we are. Bill Hands. So we have Bill Hands now. I guess I got to go look at the Fergie Jenkins card and find out what the transaction was and see what I can recreate. We'll do that at the end. And there's Bill Hands with a Cubs hat on. So here he is as a Cub, then the Twins and Rangers. So no 74. Oh, actually, there's a 74 card with 2 teams. Pretty similar performance. Twins, Rangers, and 75 is also reasonable. Just a guy. We'll put him on the keeper list. All these keepers are just guys. I mean, you know, you got 6 guys you want to keep. Arguably, probably, only maybe 1 is really good. And that's that. So there is the Rangers. There's 6 guys they allegedly want to keep. They're going to wait for phone calls. They're practically not going to get them. I don't see anybody you really want to go get and take off this team. I would say Foucault's untouchable. Lindblad, you got to say is untouchable. I mean, and particularly you can't let him go to the Oakland A's. At least while they have one more dynasty year coming up next year. Perzanowski's a Ranger. Dave Rader, there's a guy who wasn't a Ranger. You could trade him. Ken McMullen, somebody wants him. I don't think anybody will. I think the Rangers are going to find it going to be very difficult in the offseason when they're, you know, sitting next to the phone waiting for it to ring and it doesn't really ring, and then they realize that 2 of these 6 guys they're going to have to put on waivers. That's practically what's going to happen. Now, the other order of business is Hall of Famer Fergie Jenkins. And so he should have been already in Texas, and he wasn't. And arguably, that fact on its own merit, the fact that the Cubs were terrible this year, so losing Fergie wouldn't have changed that too much. They still would have been terrible, and he could have helped the Cubs this past year. I mean, he could have helped the Rangers this past year. So there should be almost a penalty phase that the Rangers get an award for not having their guy and only going to get their guy for 1 year. So they traded by the Cubs to the Rangers for Vic Harris and Bill Madlock. Well, that's a nice trade with the knowledge that Bill Madlock would turn into a star. The Cubs figured that out, which was somewhat remarkable, but great for them. They got a nice guy. They got Madlock. And of course, Fergie would pitch long into this, even though he goes to Boston. They give up on him. By 75, he's with the Red Sox. And then he goes back to the Rangers in 77. It gets really complicated. I think it goes back to the Cubs as a free agent. This is a complicated situation, and the Cubs already have Madlock, and they have the MVP Madlock. So I think that they pretty much get nothing for that, other than maybe a draft token. You want Ken McMullen, Cubs? You got once I know what his, I'm not going to make the same trade that was made during the 70s, because we know the results of these trades. The teams did not. So we're going to do what's best for the Cubs and Rangers, I guess. Sure. Just trade Bill Hands for Fergie Jenkins and call it good, I guess. Something like that. Anyway, that's it for the Eliminating the Texas Rangers video. I hope you're enjoying this analysis, and we'll see you next time.